The coastal town of Hallow's Cove, Maine, is the kind of place where fog clings to the rooftops like memory. Tourists come for the lighthouses and salt-stung air, but locals know the truth. Some houses here never forget. When Eleanor Reed signed the lease for 31 Sycamore Hill, she thought she was escaping noise. Her divorce, the city, the constant hum of people. The real estate agent, a man with a weak smile and colder hands, told her the place had been empty for years. He did not mention why. The house sat half a mile from the cliffs, built of gray cedar that had warped in the sea wind. The windows looked blind from the outside, but when Eleanor stepped in, she felt an almost human awareness, as though the walls had been waiting for her. She unpacked slowly, a kettle, a few framed photos, her late father's camcorder. The silence felt comforting until she realized she could hear it breathe. The first week passed uneventfully. Eleanor spent her mornings painting by the kitchen window and her nights reading by the fireplace. Yet she could never quite shake the feeling that someone was watching. She blamed it on the creaks, old timber, shifting air, normal for a century-old house. But on the fourth night, she noticed the sound followed her footsteps, delayed by half a second, like an echo that needed time to think. One afternoon, while dusting the upstairs hallway, she found a small brass plate screwed into the wall near the ceiling. It bore a faded engraving, "Property of Hallow's Cove Security Council, 1978. Beneath it, a circular indentation sealed over with paint. She tapped it. Hollow. By evening, curiosity overcame caution. She fetched a screwdriver and pried the plate loose. Behind it lay a tiny glass eye, a lens wired into the wall, still intact, though dust-choked. When she followed the cable, it ran downward, not toward an outlet, but into the floorboards, disappearing toward the basement. The basement smelled of salt and rust. A single bulb flickered overhead. Against the far wall stood a steel cabinet, locked with a chain. The chain was new, the padlock older, engraved with the same initials, HCSC. She didn't own a bolt cutter, so she left it. But that night, she dreamed of it unlocking itself, the door creaking open to reveal hundreds of eyes blinking in the dark. When she woke, her kettle was already boiling. Eleanor tried to rationalize it. Maybe she'd left the stove on. Maybe the electrician who prepped the house still had a key. But when she checked the back door, the latch was still bolted from the inside. That same day, she received her first piece of mail. No return address. Inside, a single Polaroid photograph, the house, taken from across the street, time-stamped 2:14 a.m. In the window of the upstairs bedroom, her silhouette. She hadn't been awake at that hour. 2 weeks later, Eleanor found the key. It was hidden in the camcorder case she'd brought from her father's belongings, a small iron key wrapped in electrical tape. She had no memory of putting it there. When she fit it into the cabinet lock, it turned smoothly, as if waiting. Inside lay a collection of old VHS tapes, each labeled only by date. The earliest, June 3rd, 1978. The latest, October 12, 1994. She brushed the dust from one and carried it upstairs. The living room still had a built-in VCR from the previous tenants. When she pressed play, the screen filled with static, then stabilized into a view she recognized instantly. The same living room, decades earlier, filmed from a corner ceiling angle. A woman sat on the couch reading. Every so often, she looked up, directly into the camera, as though she knew it was there. Halfway through the tape, a door opened behind her. Someone unseen entered. The woman turned, and the footage cut to black. Eleanor ejected the cassette, hands trembling. She checked the rest, dozens of tapes, each filmed from different rooms in the house: kitchen, bedroom, basement. Always the same pattern, a tenant living normally until something approached from off-screen. Each tape ended abruptly. She searched the cabinet again and found a yellowed notebook tucked behind the reels. The first page read, 31 Sycamore Hill, Observation Unit Alpha, authorized personnel only. The following pages contained logs, handwritten notes detailing experiments, timestamps, and subject initials. Most lines began with, Subject A exhibits elevated stress response when aware of observation. The final entry, scrawled in darker ink, read, Subject terminated, system reset. Her stomach tightened. These weren't just surveillance videos. They were records of human observation and possibly human elimination. That night, Eleanor left the house and drove to the diner on Main Street. She ordered black coffee and asked the waitress about Sycamore Hill. The waitress, an older woman named May, froze mid-pour. "You're living there?" she said quietly. "Honey, nobody stayed in that place longer than a month." May leaned closer. Back in the 80s, the government rented it out for some kind of behavioral study. Folks said they wired the place with cameras. Whole town knew. Then one day, the crew just vanished. Building sat empty since. Eleanor tried to laugh, but her voice cracked. "You think they're still watching?" May's answer was a whisper. "Darling, some houses learn how to do it on their own." When Eleanor returned home past midnight, every light in the house was on. The front door hung slightly open. Inside, the TV played static. On the screen, a new image began to fade in. Her, standing at the diner, captured from an impossible angle, as if filmed from across the street. Her breath hitched. Then the picture flickered and the camera panned slowly toward the window of 31 Sycamore Hill. From inside that window, another camera pointed back. Morning brought no comfort. The air inside the house felt heavier, as if the walls had been listening all night. Eleanor decided to confront the thing directly. She would watch every tape. She began with the earliest one, dated June 3, 1978. The footage showed a young couple, Thomas and Lydia Hale, moving into the same house, smiling, unaware of the hidden eyes in the walls. The video quality was grainy, but clear enough to read their expressions. At first, everything seemed normal. They painted, cooked, laughed. But as days passed, the couple grew quieter. Lydia often stared at the corners of the ceiling. Thomas began covering mirrors with bedsheets. On June 20th, the log entry matched the tape. Subject B displays awareness of auditory stimuli between 3 and 4 a.m. That same night on camera, Lydia sat up in bed suddenly, looking toward the lens as though hearing something inside the wall. Then she whispered, "Stop watching." The picture flickered, and for a single frame, a shadowed face appeared reflected in the glass. Not hers, not his. She paused the tape, her heart racing. She rewound, frame by frame. The face was unmistakable, hollow eyes, expressionless, close enough to fog the glass. She turned off the TV and sat in silence, realizing that the room in the footage, the bedroom, was directly above where she sat now. The creak above her answered that thought. She climbed the stairs. The bedroom door was open. Inside, dust drifted through a pale shaft of morning light. There, Etched faintly into the wooden headboard were 4 words she'd never seen before. "We can still see." Fear turned into fixation. Eleanor spent the next 2 days scouring archives at the Hallow Cove Library. She found an old newspaper microfilm dated August 1979. Local couple missing after federal behavioral study ends in tragedy. The article described how Thomas and Lydia Hale were last seen leaving town in the middle of the night. No vehicle was ever found. The property was sealed, pending federal retrieval of materials. But there was more. A quote from the project supervisor, Dr. Nathaniel Cohen. "Our equipment recorded beyond our parameters. Some signals persisted after shutdown." Eleanor copied the article and circled the line, "persisted after shutdown." Whatever they built in this house, it didn't turn off. That evening, as fog swallowed the cliffs outside, Eleanor noticed something new. Faint static whispering from the old radio in the corner, though it wasn't plugged in. When she turned the dial, a voice emerged, distorted, genderless, mechanical. Subject: resumed observation, continuity maintained. She froze. "Who's there?" The reply came after a long hiss. "You are." The bulb above her burst. Eleanor began recording everything: audio, notes, timestamps. She wanted proof, but the more she documented, the more the house seemed to respond. Every night, new sounds: tapping beneath the floorboards, the faint click of camera shutters, whispering through vents. At dawn, she noticed new scratches appearing near the baseboards, small circular holes, evenly spaced like someone drilling from below. She lifted one of the boards. Beneath it, an old crawl space stretched into darkness. The smell of salt water and metal wafted upward. She climbed down with a flashlight and nearly dropped it. Hundreds of tiny glass lenses were embedded into the earth, arranged like a mosaic, all pointing up toward her. In the center lay a single reel of film marked Test Footage, Phase 2. Back upstairs, she threaded the reel through her father's old projector. The film stuttered, showing grainy monochrome images of a basement laboratory. Figures in lab coats stood around a pulsating wall of screens. One man's voice narrated. Subject neural feedback loop is sustaining. Auditory response achieved. The structure is retaining memory. The camera panned and revealed the same basement Eleanor had just come from, only newer, cleaner. And on the far wall, written in marker, House Neural Lattice, Cohen Prototype. The next frame showed the same man turning toward the lens, Dr. Cohen. He smiled faintly, then said, "If you are watching this, it means the lattice learned your name." The reel ended in silence. Eleanor's recordings began capturing voices she never heard in real time, whispers hidden between frames of silence. When she slowed the audio, she could make out phrases. "We remember the watchers." "The house sees because it was seen." And one voice, softer than the rest, "Help us turn it off." She realized the house wasn't just haunted. It was alive with the memories of everyone who lived under its gaze. That night, she dreamed of wires sprouting from her skin, merging with the walls, her heartbeat syncing with the electrical hum of the house. When she woke, her hands were covered in dust, and she was standing in the basement, though she had no memory of walking there. Days blurred into each other. Eleanor stopped checking the clock. The light never seemed to change. Outside, the town of Hallow's Cove carried on. Fishermen, tourists, church bells. But inside Sycamore Hill, time had folded in on itself. Then a knock on the door. A man introduced himself as Deputy Grant. "Ma'am, we've had a report about strange activity up this way. Folks said they've been seeing lights." Eleanor almost laughed, relief flooding her voice. "Please come in." He stepped inside, glancing around the living room. "You live alone?" Yes. He nodded, scanning the walls. You know, my uncle used to work here, government contractor. Said this place had a mind of its own. Before she could respond, the radio crackled again. This time clearly. Grant, do not enter the perimeter. The deputy froze. Did you hear that? Eleanor whispered. It knows your name. The lights dimmed. The deputy reached for his radio. Base, this is... The line went dead. The bulb above them began to hum. Then, one by one, every camera lens hidden in the walls slid open, tiny mechanical shutters clicking in unison. Eleanor screamed. The deputy drew his weapon and fired at the ceiling, but the walls absorbed the shots like water. The hum deepened, vibrating through the floor. Then silence. When Eleanor opened her eyes, the deputy was gone. Only his flashlight remained, rolling slowly across the floor until it pointed at the wall where a new photograph was pinned. It showed her standing alone moments ago, hand outstretched toward empty air. The caption beneath read, "Subject replaced." That night, the town's power grid briefly failed. Locals reported faint rhythmic flickers from the hill, like a heartbeat pulsing through the fog. When electricity returned, 31 Sycamore Hill appeared completely dark. No sign of Eleanor Reed was ever found. 2 weeks after Eleanor Reed's disappearance, a storm tore through Hallow's Cove, flooding most of the lower district. When the water receded, it exposed something buried near the cliffs behind Sycamore Hill, an old steel vault, sealed and half swallowed by mud. Inside, authorities found hundreds of tapes, journals, and film reels labeled Property of Hallow's Cove Cognitive Experimentation Division. Each tape was cataloged and reviewed by the Maine Bureau of Investigation. The footage showed dozens of unidentified subjects over the decades, men, women, children, living inside the same house, monitored day and night. The earliest reels dated back to 1964, 10 years before the supposed government study began. The investigators noticed something chilling. Every subject's behavior followed the same pattern. Week 1, confusion. Week 2, paranoia. Week 3, attempted escape. Week 4, disappearance. The last few seconds of each tape always showed the same image, the subject standing still, staring into the corner of the room, their eyes reflecting light like a camera lens. When the team played Eleanor's final footage, the pattern repeated. Except this time, the reflection wasn't light. It was movement behind her, as if the walls themselves were breathing. Then, the tape abruptly stopped. The forensic team tried to rewind, but the reel refused to move. The film had fused into the player as though melted from inside. They brought in Dr. Abigail Clem, a cognitive neuroscientist specializing in memory feedback loops. After 3 days of analysis, she made a statement. The architecture of this house, its walls, its wiring, was designed as a neural recording system. It didn't just watch, it learned. According to Dr. Clem, the cone prototype, mentioned in the earlier footage, was an early experiment in environmental memory replication, a Cold War-era project meant to build self-learning observation structures capable of recording human behavior without active surveillance. But something went wrong. Instead of recording memories, the system began absorbing them. When investigators returned to the site to dismantle the house, they discovered the floorboards were no longer wood. The grains had hardened into a translucent resin. Embedded inside were fingerprints, eyes, and fragments of faces frozen mid-expression, as though imprinted by memory itself. It wasn't a structure anymore. It was an organism made of observation. They sealed the property and classified it under Federal Containment Case 4418. But the town of Hallow's Cove never forgot. A year later, A graduate researcher from Boston University gained restricted access to a fragment of the recovered audio archives. Among them was a recording labeled Experiment 4418, Subject E. It lasted exactly 7 minutes and 23 seconds. At first, it was nothing but static. Then a woman's breathing, slow, uneven. Her voice whispered, "This isn't a house, it's a reflection. Every eye leaves a print." Then silence, followed by hundreds of overlapping whispers repeating one word: watch. The sound engineers noted a strange pattern hidden in the waveform. When slowed and visualized, it resembled the outline of a house. The file corrupted itself seconds later. Today, the location of Hallow's Cove remains unmarked on modern maps. The hill has eroded into the sea, but fishermen still say that on clear nights, you can see light flickering beneath the waves, as if something is still recording. They say if you point a camera toward that water, the footage will never show waves, only rooms. Rooms that breathe, rooms that remember, rooms that are still watching.